I am Marwan Cameron, and this is the Conduit. All right, y'all. I am back. I told you I might come on back today, and I felt like I probably should go ahead and do that. It's on my mind. And they say the best thing that you can do is talk about it. Don't hold it in. So, well, I'm going to go ahead and do that. What you're seeing here is a picture when I think I was 5 or 6. Maybe I was probably 6. 6. I think I can't see what it says in the back, but that is me on the left and my brother Thomas on the right. And we are celebrating Jaredin, either his birthday or his adoption. As you know, my adoptive father, Reverend Winthrop Cameron, adopted 17 of us. And I was the first. And I think this is the adoption celebration for Jaredin, which, as you can kind of see in the back, his name was still Jermaine at that point in time. Many of us had different names, uh, and my dad renamed us. So my name is Marwan Kayin Akil Cameron. My name means of historical personage, a person long hoped for, or a child long hoped for, and I can't remember what the other meaning is. And so we had a decision, depending on how old we were, on if we wanted to change our name, and then we had input on what we wanted to change it to. I was 5, so I didn't have any input on that. So my dad gave me my names. Believe it or not, I was a Damien before. So do I look like a Damien to you? But that's my brother Tom. Okay. Let me show you a more recent picture of my brother Tom. One that I know that he really liked. He enjoyed his physique. One thing about Tom was he was natural. He didn't use weight, so he was just a naturally strong dude and tremendously fast. I think I told you the story about when we ran away from home, and he ran so fast. He used to do cross country. He ran so fast that he had like a half a block on me, and I remember Dad was chasing us in the car, and I ended up getting caught because I couldn't run fast enough. He was, and I don't think I was slow back then, but whew, Tom was fast. Tom was fast. Um, but that's my brother Tom, Thomas, uh, as well as Oswald Cameron, and that was his name. And like I said, had a friend of mine. He's had a loss in the family and needed some information. So I was looking that information up for him, and of course, getting that information because Tom uh, died on 9/11/2019. I had to, that's going to bring back the memories, getting that information and whatnot. And so um, the family wants some answers that are surrounding his death um, that we don't have. So we don't have any closure. Of course, we're talking about, September 11th, 2019. And then right after that, COVID hits within 6 months and everything closes down. And, now, things are starting to get back to where they were. Um, so I'm going to share this information with you because, like I said, I think one, they say it's good to talk about it. Two, if there's anyone that can help me, I would appreciate it. I would appreciate it. I'm not really sure what my options are at this point, or where do I go? What do I do? So as you know, last year, I think this was October, I went up to Bellingham to spread the ashes of my brothers and my father, which was good. It was, what to say, cathartic for me to do. But as I said, my brother died on 9/11 of 2019 under some very questionable circumstances. And, I want some answers. So, this is the autopsy report. Uh, and so this is my brother here, deceased. Here's his toxicology report. He had no drugs or alcohol in his system. And, I want to be clear, my he died in police custody. And I'm not saying that there was any wrongdoing done. Um, but what I am saying is that, we would like to have some answers so that we can have some closure because we don't have that. And what I will say about my brother is, for those that knew him, he uh, has a long history of being in trouble with the law. And, obviously he was in police custody and for what appears to be good reason, or at least reason that they had, right? But there were no signs of him uh, being suicidal or talking about taking his life or anything of that nature. Um, Matter of fact, quite the opposite. He had, plans with folks, and I mean, had, business things going on and plans with people, and things were looking up for him. And so, uh, from the reports that I got from the people that I spoke with, there weren't any signs, right? And definitely no proverbial, note or manifesto or anything like that. Um, so I'm going to share this stuff with you uh, as much as I can. And like I said, I came across it. I did a Freedom of Information Act and got this information, and it just seemed really strange to me. And like I said, I'm not really sure what to do at this point, but talk about it. So, this is kind of the statement from the sheriff's office from King County. And so there's a bunch of different kind of testimonies here that are there. The times listed are approximate. On 9/11/2019 at approximately 11:20 hours, I was in precinct 4. I heard a radio broadcast that the subject had hung himself in one of the holding cells and was like 222. I don't know what 222 is. I walked directly to the holding cell and observed several detectives performing CPR on the individual. I then made direct contact with Major Anderson and advised him what was occurring, and then ensured that a response from aid personnel was imminent. Once aid personnel arrived, I returned to the holding cell again and inspected the holding cell register. I verified that the person in the cell was the same person listed on the register, my brother. I then secured the entire register and pulled it in Major Anderson's office. I spoke briefly to some shoreline detectives and Deputy Bates near the holding cell. I instructed them to clear the immediate area and wait in the detective office as they would be required to give statements and interviewed as to their involvement. And then later on, he escorted someone for a walkthrough. Okay. So, like I said, there's a number of statements here. So let's kind of go through the timeline here. Okay, and this investigation was performed by Detective Johnson, case number Charlie 19034937. And so there was a video review of the timeline. So on 9/12, a review of the video used in this review Was folder with 4 cameras, BU Precinct 4 Holding Cell 2, BU Precinct 4 North Hall, yada, yada, yada. Video only, no audio. And so he says, I began watching video and documenting the times. At 10:19, suspect Thomas Cameron, my brother, in custody at Fred Meyer's at 14,300 First Avenue South. At 10:28, which is 9 minutes later, Detective Keelan arrives at the precinct with my brother. A cell log at 10:30, first, and I think this is the written written document of the log. 10:30, first entry in the holding cell log. No one present in the holding cell lobby. At 10:31, a minute later, Cameron escorted into the holding cell lobby through the west hallway. And this is on video. 10:31 and 40 seconds, TAC 30 enters holding cell 2 to make sure it is clear. During this time, TAC 30 searches Cameron, removes property and clothing items. Flex cuffs are removed. At 10:34, about 3 minutes later, Cameron enters holding cell 2, immediately begins pacing the cell, in and out of camera view. A minute later, at 10:35, Cameron out of view and re-enters at 10:40, no longer wearing a shirt. 2 minutes later, 10:37, Detective Keelan enters the holding cell lobby through the west hallway door and walks to shelf that holds the holding logbook. Appears to be making an entry in the logbook. At 10:37, 30 seconds later, Detective Keelan exits the holding cell lobby through the west hallway door. At 10:40, second time entry in logbook. No one present in the holding cell lobby. Uh, the video log at 10:40, at the same time, Cameron re-enters the camera view, no longer wearing a t-shirt or a shirt. At 10:40, 3 seconds later, Cameron jumps onto the bench, east wall of holding cell. At 10:40, 4 seconds later, Cameron jumps down from the bench, holding an apparent shirt in left hand, and walks off camera toward holding cell door toilet area. At 10:41, Detective Keelan enters the holding cell lobby through the west hall door, wearing light-colored latex gloves, walks to the shelf and appears to make an entry in the logbook. Does not leave this immediate area. A minute later, Detective Keelan exits holding cell lobby through the west hallway door. The cell log at 11 a.m., third time entry in logbook, no one present in the holding cell lobby. The video at 11:02 showed Detective Keelan enters the holding cell lobby through west hallway door. She is seen walking directly to the door area of the holding cell 2 and goes off camera. Door is not visible by camera view. Video 11:02 and 6 seconds, Detective Keelan emerges from the holding cell 2 door area back onto the camera. As she walks away, she looks over her left shoulder toward the holding cell door. She then walks back to the shelf with the logbook. At 11:02 and 44 seconds, Detective Keelan exits the holding cell lobby through the west hallway door. At 11:04 and 44 seconds, Detective Keelan enters the holding cell lobby through the west hallway door and picks up Cameron property from the floor beneath the shelf. When she enters and as she's walking to the shelf, she looks toward the holding cell door wearing gloves. Exits with property through the west hallway door. Cell log 11:20, four-time entry in cell log, no one present in the holding cell area. The video at 11:26 and 59 seconds, Detective Keelan enters holding cell lobby through the west hallway door. She's followed by Detective Soderstorm and then Detective Gedney. Detective Soderstorm stops by shelf with logbook. Detective Keelan then stops by shelf with logbook. Detective Gedney then joins them. Appears like they're looking for something. Video 11:28. Detective Soderstorm walks off camera to area of the door to the holding cell 2. He comes back on camera at 11:28 and 31 seconds. At 11:28 and 41 seconds, Detective Storm walks off camera several times to the area of the holding cell 2. The video at 11:29, uniformed deputy walks into the holding cell through the west hallway door. He joins other detectives and they appear to be looking for something on the shelf with the logbook. Video at 11:30, Dr. Keelan exits through the west hallway door. And the video at 11:31:02, the precinct detectives begin entering the holding cell lobby, led by Detective Whitaker. The video at 11:37:28, cell entry made. Detective Gedney is the first person in the cell. Pies the corner with the shield. Others enter. So I think this is a defensive maneuver to protect themselves. The video at 11:38:28, Detective Gedney seen doing CPR. The video at 11:42, first fire department person enters the holding cell lobby, followed by others walking into the holding cell. Video at 11:42:47, Captain Freeberger inspects holding cell log. He then walks out with the log through the east hallway door. At 11:45, the first medic one person enters holding cell area, followed by others. And at 11:59:54, crime scene tape put up by Sergeant McLaughlin across the open west hallway door. All right, so this is the holding cell log that they write in the video that was captured of the time of my brother's death. So, um, you can see, my brother, he jumps up on the table or on the bench. He takes off his shirt. Um, and this is at 10:40 here. Okay. And then at 10:40, 3 seconds later, he re-enters camera view. He's not wearing his shirt. And then he jumps back onto the bench on the east wall of the holding cell. And then the last thing that the video caught was 10:40, my brother jumping down from the bench, holding his shirt in his left hand, and walks off camera holding cell door, toilet area, or the holding cell's door in the toilet area. So that's where he's walking toward. But he's not on the bench and he's got his shirt in his hand. So from 10:40, that's the last time that my brother was seen alive on camera, at least. 10:40 to the fourth time the entry log, which was 11:20. Okay. So, and I think there was another entry uh earlier there, third time. So at 11 there was an entry, okay? And then there was another entry at 11:20. And so they're kind of coming back and forth. They're looking for something. I don't know what they're looking for. I don't think it was ever stated in anything that I read. And then they enter back in, and at 11:37, so 17 minutes after the last entry, they decide to make entry and see what's going on with my brother. So about 17 minutes. But there's no stating on when he allegedly took his life. And again, like I said, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that they did something. I'm just simply stating that I would like answers. So I want to show you the pictures that they provided. So in the Freedom of Information Act, they took pictures of the holding cell. So you can see the crime scene tape here. I'm assuming maybe this is the holding cell in this area. This looks like whatever they were trying to use to resuscitate him. This is what the holding cell looks like here. This is what the holding cell looks like. Okay, so uh, from the outside, this is the door, and you saw that there's a little window on that door. So this is showing into um, the holding cell. And of course, prisoners are supposed to be able to use the bathroom in privacy. So that's why it's around the corner here. So when they say that they're seeing him jump on and off the bench, the bench is at the other end of the picture that you can't see closest to us. So it's nowhere near where the toilet is. So they see him jump up and down onto it. And then they said the last thing that they viewed was that he walked from inside the door and out of view toward the toilet area. Uh, uh, Before I continue, I should say some of these images are graphic. You will not see any pictures of my brother in that state, so don't worry about that. But they are still. Um, so please check your holding cells once you leave with your subject. Thank you, precinct sergeants. This is a picture of one of the police officers' vehicles. And, I just thought this was weird. I'm not sure why they felt the need to take these pictures as evidence. And this is the stuff that, again, was provided to me from the Freedom of Information Act. They took pictures of the back seat. Again, I'm not sure what the relevance of that is. A close up of the back seat. If anyone knows why they would do that, and that would be, I'd appreciate knowing that. Um, I mean, it's like, why are you taking pictures of your police car? So I'm not sure what these pictures are supposed to be of, right? And so I'm not sure what we're supposed to glean from these pictures again and the relevance of these pictures. And so they're literally just taking pictures of the police car, doors open, inside, showing what's there. This is the inside of the precinct holding cell area. Here's holding cell number 2. So this is where my brother was. As you can see, there was a camera that shows in there, but not to where the bathroom is. So everything is roped off as a crime scene. Okay, again, I'm not quite sure. I think these were part of my brother's belongings in that bag for sure. So maybe that's why they were taking a picture of that. So September 11, 2019 at 13:41. Digislate. Okay. And I'm not sure what that means. So the camera is here, right? And remember the camera is not going to show them using the toilet, right? And so here is the t-shirt that you'll see in their statement where they cut him down. Um I'm not sure. Oh yeah, I'm just not sure. But that's really there's a few more pictures of oh here we go. So you can see I don't know, is that blood? I'm not sure what that is. These are all the um I think maybe this is adrenaline or whatever they use to try to resuscitate someone. That's my brother's shirt, the cut down piece of it. Okay, so it's here against the wall, and then here it's in the middle of the room. This is a closer close up of the shirt hanging. In the statement, you'll see that this was a short sleeve shirt. Um, so, I mean, that's a hell of a thing for, someone to, and my brother had a small frame, to tie this around his neck and have it support the weight of his body um, to hang himself. This is a view of where the camera is kind of showing what it sees and then where my brother was found by the officers. All right, so that's all the pictures there. Um, like I said, not very helpful. It doesn't really show a lot of anything. Um, so I think that's tough. But let's kind of get into some of the statements here. So, again, this is the narrative. On 9/11 at approximately 10:19, I assisted the TAC 30 arrest of a burglar suspect named Thomas A. Cameron. At approximately 10:30, Cameron was transported from the scene to Precinct 4, which was located at 14905 6th Ave Southwest, by deputy. There, I asked for a couple of other TAC 30 deputies to assist Deputy P. Keelan and I with escorting Cameron from Deputy Keelan's car to the precinct holding cell. Deputies Spiewalk, Marshall, and Garmy joined Deputy Keelan as well as we walked Cameron into the precinct. In the booking area of the holding cell, we stopped so Deputy Keelan could put Cameron's information in the booking log. Deputy Keelan asked Cameron if he had any medical issues, to which he replied, F you, I'm not telling you guys shit. Cameron went on to call Deputy Keelan a lying whore. I then told Cameron to spread his feet so that we could search him. Cameron complied, and I removed his belt, which was already unbuckled. Deputy Marshall then informed me that he would conduct a search of Cameron's person. I watched Deputy Marshall conduct a full search of Cameron, to include removing his shoes and socks. After the search was completed, Deputy Marshall prepared to remove Cameron's flex cuffs. I told Cameron to put his right hand on top of his head when it was released. Cameron responded by saying something to the effect that he wasn't going to comply with doing anything we told him to. I turned Cameron slightly toward me and began to explain that I was giving him a lawful order when Cameron interrupted and said, I know you're giving me a lawful order. Cameron's hands were then removed from the flex cuffs and he complied with putting both of them on his head. As this was occurring, deputies behind me informed me that both cell 1 and 2 were checked and deemed clear. I then asked Cameron to enter cell 2, which he silently did without incident. I then locked the cell door and exited the cell area. This concluded my involvement in the investigation. So I think this is important to note, um, because this talks about, obviously my brother's demeanor. Anyone being arrested isn't going to be happy about it, right? But at the same time, it wasn't like he was, fighting or resisting. It seems like he complied without incident, very quietly, as their testament showed. All right. So another statement on 9/11 in 2019, I was in the Burien SeaTac on duty, Sergeant, approximately 11:30 hours. I was walking out of the HIVIZ CID office when I observed several precinct number 4 detectives walking into the holding cell wearing blue gloves, looking concerned. I walked into the holding cell lobby and inquired as to the concern. I was advised that the suspect the shoreline detectives had arrested earlier and had placed in this holding cell was hiding out of sight in the east side of the holding cell. As I walked into this holding cell lobby, I observed Detective Whitaker hailing the suspect in the cell, trying to establish a cooperative dialogue with the suspect in the holding cell. I then listened as Detective Getney and others were planning a tactical entry into the cell based on the suspect's history. Okay. So I'm wondering, what is the history uh, that they had of my brother. I then inquired as to how long the suspect had been out of sight and silent, as I was told approximately 10 minutes or more. I looked at the holding cell check sheet log and observed that the last two check entries were 11:20 and interviewed 11:30. I suggested that the suspect could have a medical issue and entry needed to be made expeditiously. I offered a shield, which I immediately retrieved and handed to Detective Getney and gave instructions to enter the cell. I then stayed at the cell entrance and observed Detective Getney's pie the corner and confront the suspect. Again, I think that's a security maneuver to enter in and keep themselves safe. Detective Getney announced that the suspect was standing on the toilet and ordered him to step down. Detective Getney then announced that the suspect had hung himself and needed a knife to cut the suspect down. I observed the detectives move to cut the suspect down and begin CPR. As I immediately left to retrieve the AED, when I observed an AED being brought to the holding cell, I moved to the major chief offices and advised of the situation. I returned to the holding cells and ensured that the log be started of the actions taken. I then ensured that the medics had been summoned by Deputy Nelson and that a deputy was standing at the gate to ensure that the medic one would have immediate access into the vehicle pen area. I then retrieved the crime scene tape and taped the holding area closed. As I was taping off the holding cell area, I contacted Sergeant Minikin and advised that he would require major crimes team response describing the incident. I then ended my part of the investigation. All right, so we've got another testimony here. On 9/11, 2019, at about 11:20 hours, I was in precinct 4 following attack 30 mission documented under the KCSO case number yada yada yada. After the debrief, I returned to my car to get my standard K9 patrol uniform so I could change out of my TAC 30 uniform. I changed into my locker room. As I was leaving precinct 4, Sergeant Oroshiba asked me if I could stay to help. He pointed me to the holding cell area. I heard deputies and detectives saying that Cameron cannot be seen from outside his holding cell, and he was not responding to the direction to make himself seen. I heard someone say they were concerned Cameron was going to attempt an ambush if we went into the cell. Deputies started to formulate a plan. I left to get my radio out of my car and came back. I saw a deputy with a shield. I saw a deputy with lethal cover, and deputies prepared to go hands on. Someone asked if I would have my taser ready. I drew my taser. The door to the cell was open. Deputies went inside. I heard the deputy say something like he hung himself. I did not see Cameron and I didn't even get a good look inside the cell. Immediately, I reholstered my taser and I walked into the hallway so my radio could transmit. About 11:39, I radioed a request for aid. Heard someone say that they were going for an AED. I walked back toward the holding cell. I heard Cameron did not have a pulse. I walked back into the hallway and relayed the information. I said I would take responsibility for getting aid crews access to the building. I propped open the building door and walked to the personnel gate. I had a Buren deputy stay at the gate, clear parking spaces in front for aid. I walked to the vehicle gate. Aid arrived at 11:41. I confirmed over the radio that Medic 1 was told to come. Several minutes later, Medic 1 arrived. I let them in the vehicle gate so they could park close to the building. Once they were inside the gate, I ensured the exits stayed clear in case they needed to leave quickly. I stayed at the gates until I learned that Cameron was declared dead. This ends my involvement. The next testimony. On 9/11/2019, approximately 11:20 hours, I was at my desk in Precinct 4 when approached by Shoreline CID Detective Gedney asking for assistance in the holding cell area. Myself, Detective T. Philbrick, and Detective M. McDonald went to assist. Shoreline detectives alerted us that the arrestee was not complying with commands to make himself visible before opening the cell door for interview. The suspect was known to be a convicted felon with a mental health history, including erratic confrontational behavior to law enforcement, including wearing a fake suicide vest to cause alarm. Suspect was well known to KCSO deputies for trying to provoke confrontations with law enforcement and the public. With this information, detectives were cautious to open the cell door in haste, expecting a possible violent response. Seems like I may need to get some information on this, documented history that my brother allegedly had, and the fact that everyone seemed so very knowledgeable of this. I was trained as a crisis negotiator, and while detectives formed a plan to safely enter the cell, I continued clearly hailing through the door. I spoke in a friendly tone, but loud and close enough to the door to reasonably assume anyone in the cell could hear and understand my instructions. I repeatedly requested the subject step into the visible area so we could talk to him and ultimately verify his welfare. I then asked if he would give a sound or any indication that he was okay. I heard nothing from inside the cell. I had a clear view of the majority of the space through the window and cannot see no part of the subject visible and no other motion. It could be assumed that the subject had concealed himself out of sight in the toilet area adjacent to the door. I have been in the cell before and know the layout and the location of the toilet area. Lethal, firearm, taser, shield, duty, and stack order were quickly established, and we entered the cell. Detective Getney was first with the shield, and in second saw the subject in the toilet area and immediately ordered him to show his hands. Almost immediately, he announced that the subject had hung himself. Our tactical posture immediately shifted to that of rendering and facilitating aid. I saw the subject shirtless, hanging by a black t shirt around his neck, tied to a mesh light covering near the ceiling to prevent tampering with holding cell lights. They are covered in the metallic mesh protector with a series of approximately half-inch holes. I later noticed I later noted that the subject had tied his t-shirt through two of the holes in order to hang himself. The improv noose supported all the subject's weight, and his feet were free hanging above the ground as if he had stepped off the safe height of the toilet. I had a pocket knife in my right pocket, which I deployed and cut the subject down. The toilet area of the cell was too small to fit more than one person. Also, in my urgency to cut the ligature, I did not plan any team approach to guiding the subject to the ground. My knife cut the t shirt, and the subject fell heavily and immediately. I attempted to guide the subject to the ground as best I could. My intention was to get him into a prone rescue position as quickly as possible. I was prepared to cut the remaining ligature from the subject's neck, but I believe it pulled off and was discarded as we cleared the airway and began CPR. I checked for a pulse and I felt none. I kept the airway open, checked for mouth obstructions, and noted air leaving the mouth during chest compressions. I heard the radio call go out for aid and noted team members staying busy assisting the aid effort. Detective Philbrick got an AED and used it per department training. The AED evaluated the subject and advised no shock. We resumed CPR immediately. Doors were propped open to facilitate aid's fastest entry, and space was cleared to hand over CPR efforts to fire crews, who arrived minutes after. When the fire and medic crews took over life-saving attempts, I began the crime scene log, including name of people who were present. I noted potential evidence items to be secured, such as subject clothing and the AED, but I did not interfere with the aid crews seen until they declared a 12:06 hours time of death and left. I noted the crew's names as such. Here's another account. On 9/11/2019, about 11:30, shoreline detectives came into precinct 4 detective office requesting assistance. They explained that the male who was in custody might be hiding around the corner out of sight, waiting to assault deputies. I followed them across the hallway into the holding cell. There are obvious cameras aimed into the holding cell, however, it was unclear how to view them. I went to Sergeant Corey and Sergeant McLaughlin and asked if they could assist me in viewing the camera prior to our entry. We were unable to access the footage, so I returned to the holding cell. Sergeant McLaughlin offered Detective Gedney a shield. He accepted. We made our tactical plan prior to going in. When I was going to be less than lethal, the Deputy Keelan covered lethal. I did not have a taser on me at the time and asked Deputy Keelan for hers. Detective Soderstrom opened the door wide enough for the group to enter. I entered third or fourth in the group and heard other detectives giving commands, and someone said, "He's hiding in the corner." I was unable to see the suspect and came around the group. In the event a taser application was needed. As I came around the group, I could see it appeared that the subject was standing on the toilet in the corner. I then realized he was hanging by a ligature as his neck had an unnatural bend to it. The subject was not moving and his arms and legs were dangling straight down. I heard someone say something that indicated the subject had hung himself. Another detective yelled, "Get the knife." Cut him down. Detective Whitaker grabbed the suspect with his left arm and cut him down with his knife in his right hand. As soon as Detective Whitaker cut through the material, he controlled his fall to the ground. After the suspect's body was on the ground, his head hit the ground, making a sound. I saw detectives quickly start CPR and I ran to get an AED. Several people said, "Get aid." And Deputy Nelson told me he was going to call for aid. When I returned with the AED, Detective Philbrick placed the device pads on the subject. The AED was turned on and the automated system started giving instructions to those treating the patient. The system instructed no one touch the patient, so I repeatedly, loudly, "Hands off the patient." At this time, I saw no one was touching him. The AED machine paused briefly and said, "Shock not advised." The machine then instructed us to start CPR. Detectives began to do CPR. I borrowed Deputy Keelan's flashlight and handed it to Detective Whitaker, who checked the suspect's eyes. Detective Whitaker opened up an eyelid and said, "Pupils are dilated." Shortly after, Burien aid fire responded and took over chest compressions and other life-saving efforts. I stood by shining a flashlight where needed, as the room was not brightly lit. A little while later, King County Medic 1 arrived and continued life-saving efforts. I stayed in the area and shined the flashlight where needed. I was present when one of the medics announced the time of death. I stayed in the room until the medics retrieved their equipment. The supplies used to treat the subject were left in place, to include anything meant to be discarded. I assisted with the Precinct 4 security as well as the scene security periodically. No one entered the taped off crime scene during the times I was watching, besides my involvement. 7 report. I arrived at Burien's Precinct 4 in response to a death that occurred in the holding cell. Detective Johnson and I met with Detective Whitaker, who gave us a walk through the scene. I could see the victim identified as Cameron Thomas laying on his back in the middle of the holding cell. There were two holding cells at Precinct 4, and he was in the easternmost cell. Medical equipment was lying on the floor around him. An AED was in the other cell beeping. Detective Whitaker said they had moved it over there after it advised no shock. The victim was wearing shorts and no socks or belt and had no shirt on. A black scrap of shirt was on the floor next to the victim. The other half of the shirt was tied to the metal grate that covers the light above the toilet area of the cell. The grate consists of approximately 1/2 inch holes and about 1/2 between the grate and the glass of light. This came after. But part of this was TAC Sergeant uh, Pugh gave me a copy of the video from the Fred Meyer that showed the victim's initial arrest. I made a copy onto a CD and gave it to Detective Johnson. I viewed the video, which showed the transaction between the victim and the detectives, and then showed TAC 30 deputies move in and arrest the victim. The victim appeared to put his hands up and get on the ground, but the view was partially blocked by vehicles. Dr. Sergeant Minikin asked Detective Keelan if she would provide a statement. Guild representatives advised her not to, and she declined. So again, when they did arrest him, he didn't fight. He got on the ground. He allowed himself to be arrested. He got to the holding cell. I mean, he had a few choice words, and I mean a few, and then immediately complied and went into a cell. I first took a recorded statement from Detective Detney and Minikin, and Sergeant Davis were in the room during the statement. Detective Gedney told me about the shoreline investigation and said he was at the command post during the arrest of the victim. Detective Gedney said that he had had no contact with the victim during the arrest or when the victim was placed in the holding cell and heard no mention of the victim making any statements about hurting himself. Detective Gedney said that when he and Detective Soderstrom went into the holding cell area and interviewed the victim, they noticed that the victim was not within view of the window. There was a narrow window in the door to each holding cell, and that he did not respond when hailed. Detective Gedney said, based on the victim's officer's safety history, they were concerned that the victim may be lying in wait around the corner in the area of the toilet, which is out of view of the window. Detective Gedney and Detective Soderstrom asked for assistance. The bureau detectives down the hall, Detective Gedney said they checked for cameras, but learned that there was no way to view them from the precinct. The detectives made the plan to open the door and extract the victim. Sergeant McLaughlin gave Detective Gedney a shield. Detective Gedney was the first one through the door, and the other detectives behind him. Once inside, Detective Gedney saw that the shirt tied up to the vent on the ceiling was tied around the victim's neck. Detective Gedney said that this was above the toilet and the victim's feet were still suspended above the ground. Detective Gedney said that one of the other detectives cut him down, and when they could find no pulse, they started CPR. Another detective attempted to use AED, but it advised no shock. Detective Gedney provided CPR until aid arrived, and then they took statements. Here, I think this is of note. Detective Whitaker used a pocket knife to cut the shirt that the victim was hanging from. Detective Whitaker attempted to control the victim's fall as he dropped to the ground. Detective Whitaker said he attempted to control the fall, but that the victim may have struck his head on the ground during the fall. Detective Whitaker said he believed he was able to pull the rest of the shirt from around the victim's neck, but that he might have had to cut it off. Detective Whitaker said that the Detective Gedney started compressions while Detective Whitaker cleared the victim's airway. Detective Whitaker said that other detectives brought in an AED, but no shock was advised. Detective Whitaker said that they were providing aid for about 4 minutes before aid arrived, and then Medic One, once aid arrived, Detective Whitaker said he started writing down names of the aid crew that were and people involved. Detective Whitaker had no contact with the victim before the victim was found hanging in the holding cell. Photographs were taken of each detective by Sergeant D4 before each interview. They were all wearing the same clothes that they were wearing during the contact with the victim. Detective Keelan was the only one in uniform. The rest were in plain clothes. All right. I'm about halfway through these statements here, and whether my brother committed suicide or something else happened, I don't know. Either way, it's tragic. Uh, as the police stated themselves, he made no indication that he was, suicidal. Uh, his friends that had talked to him as, previous as the day before, and folks that had plans with him said there was no indication that this was going to happen. He had a lot of things coming up that were good and optimistic in his life. And so uh, it's just not like him. My brother has been incarcerated. He's been in prison for a long time, several times. And even during those times, he was still here. He didn't take his life. So I just don't see why he would do that. Um, as you're reading from the statements, most of the accounts were, they cut him down and laid him gently down and started CPR. And then in a few of the uh, testimonies, you hear that he actually hit his head on his way down. So it's like, well, did his body just drop to the ground? Did you just cut him and then he just fell to the ground? I don't know. I don't know. Like I said, the pictures, that were taken of the crime scene that were provided from the Freedom of Information Act were just to me, you know, just kind of bizarre pictures of the police car and the trunk and the car open, different sides of the car doors open and the back seat, the front seat. And it's like, what's the relevance of these pictures? This history that Tom had with the police. I don't know what that is. Uh, I like to, kind of see the documentation of that because I think that's important. I know that he did have a bulletproof vest, but I don't know of you know, a vest that looked like a uh, suicide vest. I also don't think I can't see, you know, law enforcement allowing someone to walk around like that in public, knowing that that would make people feel some kind of way, right? I mean, that's like, yelling fire in a movie theater. How would that be okay? How would they allow him to continue to do that? Um, they had a documented history, as you can see from a lot of the accounts. The time frame doesn't seem to match to me. And then, of course, some of the folks seem to have this documented history of my brother being dangerous. And I didn't read the statements that were provided, but in some of them, they were thinking that he was gonna, throw urine or feces onto them if they entered the room. And it's like, where are you getting that history from? Uh, yeah. So like I said, my brother died on 9/11, 2019, and uh, trying to take care of his affairs and secure his property, which, that was, the next day I got a call um, from the detective. And by the way, all the detectives, I actually met Detective Gedney. He treated me well, was respectful, and, actually helpful. Um, they said, hey, there was an incident that the neighbors called. There's a bunch of people with ski masks breaking into your brother's home. And it's like, man, I mean, you hear about vultures, grave robbing or attacking the dead. He wasn't dead 24 hours before they were in his house stealing his stuff. They asked me how fast I could get there. When I got there, there were two, an 18, like an 18-foot or 24-foot U-Haul truck and another truck loaded with my brother's belongings. And they told me, we can't, we're not going to have an officer sit here and guard your brother's home while you figure out what to do. But I suggest you do something because, they're going to come back. And man, they came back. Uh, weren't even dead 24 hours. And they were literally robbing him. I've always hated when people uh, stole or lied. Like would give you the proverbial shirt off my back if I had it to give to you. So I really have an issue with people uh, taking stuff or saying things belong to them that don't. Uh, if anyone has any suggestions on who I might speak with locally to just kind of share this information with, help me kind of sort through this, you know, uh, I'd appreciate it. 'Cause like I said, this is a lot even for me. And I can and have uh taken on a lot. I really have. I really have. And uh staying busy is one of the ways that I've been able to, kind of process through this. It's like, my dad passes and then this comes not too long after that, and then it's with all this that's behind it, and then COVID hits, and you know, uh, we have all the stuff that's in the news. We know about the history, and again, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that's what's happened in this case. I just, there's questions uh, that I have, and I've got to do, my due diligence. If this was your brother or your son, you know, would you not want the truth? I am my brother's keeper, so I need to figure it out. So, strange thing is, my My father's anniversary is coming up here in July 29th, which is the same time that we have our basketball tournament. It's actually like the basketball tournament starts the next day. And then it's like, well, that's July. Then you got August, September, and then it's here. And then, it's my brother's anniversary. It'll be the second one. And like, all right, you got to figure this thing out. You got to do something with it. Anyhow, I should probably, let me see if I can Google it. Because we should have uh, information. I usually put this up. Um, if you are feeling suicidal, there you can get help. Please do. There's 24/7 services. You can call 360-373-5031. It's a 24/7 crisis line. So if you or someone you know is suicidal or in emotional crisis, please give a call to the 24-hour toll-free crisis line at 888-910-0416. Support is there when you need it the most. I'll go ahead and put this here in the chat. They are professionals that are there to uh, speak with you and help you. They will ensure that the help offered is appropriate for the crisis someone is experiencing. Depending on the level of need, this may include dispatching KMS, KMHS, designated mobile crisis response team for emergency assessment, including referrals to inpatient care, which may include, if necessary, involuntary detention in our evaluation and treatment centers or other psychiatric facility or substance use treatment facility. DCRs seek to assist people in crisis with the least restrictive services needed to support them in their recovery. KMHS also has a youth inpatient unit, which is temporarily closed to reduce community spread of COVID. So please call the VOA crisis line at 1-888-910-0416 for youth who may be in need of youth inpatient youth services. Uh, please do. I don't know where my brother was mentally. All I know is what his friends said, that he was fine, that he had good things going on. I know what the officers said, he, submitted uh peacefully, and we're not experts, so we're not going to know what the signs are. We don't know. Someone can exhibit a bunch of, you know, very blatant signs that we could see and tell, but they could not show anything. And this could be the case here. And it was a split second decision. And he made it and said, hey, I don't want to go back to prison. And decided that he wasn't going to do that. It's possible. And that's a scary thought. And I don't want anyone to be so sad or feel so helpless or hopeless that they make a split second decision. At the end of the day, uh, from the time that they didn't hear or see any movement, from the time that they entered in the room, we're talking about less than 20 minutes. Um, that's not a long time to make, you know, a permanent decision to a temporary situation. So please reach out, seek help, have a conversation with a professional. It may sound cliche, like it will get better, but it will get better. It will get better. You are needed. You are needed. All right. I think I'll leave it here. I don't think I can take any more today. But like I said, I wanted to share this. I'm Marwan Cameron. You're watching The Conduit. I will see you next time.